Good morning, everyone. This is Beth Schlachter, Executive Director of FP2020, and I want to thank you all for joining us here for what's our morning, and I think is your afternoon or evening, wherever you happen to be. So thank you for taking the time to be with us to share some of the information about what we launched in our annual report about 10 days ago. Actually, 2 weeks ago. Time has been flying. We have a lot of, I think, really interesting information to share from the report, and we'll walk you through what we're going to be discussing in a moment. But before I go into those details, I know that a lot of you, all of you, have been watching the outcome of the U.S. election, and that in our sector and in our family planning community, we feel acutely some of the changes that may be coming our way with regard to funding and policies from the U.S. government that have an impact on the work that all of us are doing, particularly for our colleagues at USAID and from UNFPA, and the incredible partnerships that all of you have formed with your government partners to support the work that you've been doing for so many years. So I just want to say that this time, we know what changes in administrations have meant in the past before in terms of funding. But I feel that we're in a different position in one way, that we have this FP 2020 platform to continue to bring us all together. And that partnership has been at the heart of what we've been doing for the last few years through this opportunity to work together more closely. Critically, USAID and UNFPA will continue, no matter what, to be the heart of this partnership. And FP 2020 will remain strong as well. As you may know, FP 2020 as a process is funded by the UK government and by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So the Secretariat in our work to support your work will continue unchanged in that regard. So I just want to reassure you that we're all feeling a moment of, I think, pretty intense uncertainty, and that we're feeling that here at the Secretariat. We know that there's a hunger for information about what might be coming. None of us, of course, knows that at this point, but you have our commitment here from the Secretariat that we'll be sharing information with all of you as and when we have it, and that we will maintain a strong platform here from the Secretariat to support your work moving forward. So I just wanted to share those words and to have a moment to let you know that we're thinking of all of you as well. We want your feedback about how we can be more supportive as well during this time and what's going to be most useful. So I just wanted to start our morning together with this information, because I know that since we launched the report, it feels as if the ground has shifted pretty significantly for us here in the U.S., and I know that, again, that has an impact around the world. So before we launched into looking at last year, I felt it was important that we have a moment just to think about what we're going to be doing together, and to, again, reassure you that we're here to hear from you about what we can do to adjust as the landscape adjusts, again, to make sure that we're the most effective partner to all of your work, because what you're doing in all the partner countries is, of course, the critical work, and we want to make sure that we're aligned to support you as when we can. So with that, I'll shift to cover the agenda and let you know that we're going to be talking again about sort of top-line information from the progress report, again looking at what we've measured from July 2015 to July 2016. Then we'll be joined here by our colleague Jason Bremner, who is the director for our data and performance management here at the Secretariat. And all of you know him as well from the data and measurement work, and he'll be giving an update on the core indicators at the midpoint. Then we'll have time for Q&A, and during that time, we're happy to take any questions you might have about either the findings of the report or anything else with regard to our work together. So we're happy to use that time to discuss any issues that you may want to put on the table. So before we go any further, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Rati Bishnoi, who coordinated this webinar, and Rati's going to walk us through some housekeeping notes about how the webinar will function this morning. Rati?
Thank you, everyone. I'll get started on that again. Apologies. Again, before we get started, I would just like to take you through what you are seeing on your screen. First, you are seeing the presentation, and to the right of that, you have 3 pods. One, which shows you the attendees at the meeting. One where you, the Q&A pod, where you can submit questions for the Q&A section of our briefing, and one where you can send chat to all attendees and meeting hosts. We encourage you to submit questions at any point during the meeting through the pod or through the chat feature. During the Q&A portion, those of you that are on the phone will also have a chance to hit *6 to unmute yourself and ask a question live if you'd prefer. If you need any assistance at any point during the webinar, please use the chat or Q&A pods, and in the event you have any difficulty using those, please email Elise Walter at ewalter@familyplanning2020.org. We'll also put that into the chat feature so you have that. Just one note, this presentation is being recorded, and again, thank you everyone for joining us today. Back to you.
Thank you, Rati. So with that, we'll launch into the content of the report. So I think the big news here is that we are excited to report that for the first time ever, 300 million women and girls in the 69 focus countries for FP 2020 are now able to use, per their choice, modern contraception. So this is an incredible accomplishment and a testament to the work that you all have done over many years and many decades. Within this number as well, we see some incredible progress. You see the slide in front of you that talks about the impact, so I won't go into those numbers specifically, but I did want to highlight that for the first time as well, in Eastern and Southern Africa, 30% of women are now able to use modern contraception. So that's an enormous amount of growth in an area that had been further behind. And there are some other good news stories as well as we start to peel back the layers of what it means to have 300 million women and girls using modern contraception. I also want to highlight the incredible accomplishment in West Africa as well, and this is the region of the world that has been the farthest behind, not only in family planning, but in a lot of other development and well-being indicators. And the Ouagadougou Partnership, as you know, works there with 9 of the Francophone countries. And in the Ouagadougou Partnership, they had set themselves a goal from 2011 to 2015 of reaching an additional 1 million women and girls, and they exceeded that goal last year. So they've more than doubled that to go for 2.2 million additional women and girls by 2020. So we're seeing progress, even as we haven't reached the benchmarks of progress that we had hoped to reach along the way. We are still significantly short of where we had hoped to be on our overall goal of reaching 120 million women and girls. We're short by about 19 million. My colleague Jason Bremner is going to be sharing a bit more detail on that with you. But what we do want to highlight is that we're seeing a solid 25% increase of where we would have been had this process not been launched. So while we're not where we had hoped to be, again, there are stories within this of the good work that's happening and the progress and acceleration that's taking place in a number of critical parts of the world. We're also seeing higher quality programs, a broadening of the method mix, a look at what rights-based program mean and a better understanding of that, and critically, a stronger use of the data as we have more and more information. About a week and a half ago, we were in Tanzania for the reference group meeting, as many of you are aware. And there, when we had a deep dive in the data, it was noted by our co-chairs, Babatunde Oshotemen and Chris Elias, that had we had the data in 2012 that we have now, we would be in a stronger place, they believe, because we would have had this ability that you all have now to use the data to interrogate your programs and policies and the investments of your time and effort. And so even though, again, we remain off course toward our progress, I think we know a lot more. We have better information, and we're in a better place now to move things forward. And critically, our partnership remains strong. So Rati, next slide. So this is our overall trajectory of progress that I just spoke about, and I think that you're all familiar with this slide, but I'll take just a moment in case this is new to anyone. We use the big green bar at the bottom to show the work that's happened over the many decades to build toward the 300 million women and girls. We use a rolling baseline, and we start measuring with 2012. So this year, the baseline is now at 270, and so by adding the 30.2 million additional women and girls, it gets us over that 300 million person line. The top line that you see on the graph is our trajectory toward 120 million additional women and girls. The bottom line is the anticipated growth that we would have seen had there not been the partnership. And then the middle line that's slightly above that, 25% above that, is the trajectory of progress that we're on currently. Next slide, please. So really, one of the things that we focus on in this year's report is the partnership aspect of the work that we're doing. And again, this is all of you, and working together in your countries with the broader stakeholder community under the leadership of the government's vision and the government's plans. And then working with the Secretariat in ways that we can, and we're exploring together about how we can move the partnership forward and support the work that you do. So I think we've learned a lot, particularly through the South-South collaboration opportunities that we've been able to have as well, that are helping to guide us in terms of sharing information about what's working, what's highly effective, and what more we're going to want to do in order to shift toward more effective programs and policies. So, Rati? So some of the key focus areas that have come up, again, are on accountability and how we work with our relationships to support one another, appreciating that we're all in this to try and reach the goals that we've set for ourselves, but how can we support one another to be more accountable to those goals? And where we are falling short, what can we do about that, and what's the most effective tactic, again, toward a mutually supportive environment, assuming good intention across the board of trying to reach our goals. This is something that the reference group has discussed in great detail. They remain committed to supporting the work that you do, and they want to hear from you about what they can do from their level to support the work that you're doing, either through those critical political and leadership relationships, but also in terms of really smart allocation of funding and resources as well. So one of the things that the reference group has been most interested in is hearing from the Secretariat as we share the information that we're learning more about through your challenges and successes, so that we now have a communication chain that goes from the work that you're doing up to that leadership level, knowing that all of you are communicating through your specific organizational channels. This way we have a group opportunity to hear what's happening and to make adjustments and move forward accordingly. And that gets to the critical idea of partnerships as well, and to investing in this idea that we can do more together. And I think that that's really where we're seeing a lot of really creative collaboration taking place, particularly toward your CIP goals and through these country action plans. And then youth remains the critical area that we all know we need to do more in and to invest in more smartly. And again, here I think that we have better evidence, and we are committed in 2017 to supporting the work that you're doing by creating a process to share this evidence with you and to support any changes in programs or policies that you feel might be most advantageous within your setting and your work framework in order to have the most effective programs to reaching young people. So we're excited to partner with you in 2017 to do that more effectively. So next slide, Rati, on mobilizing resources. Excuse me. I was traveling for about 3 weeks, so I managed to get a cold from that, so you'll have to excuse me from time to time. Doing my best to deal with that through the briefing. So on mobilizing resources, we'll shift to talking about what we've known through 2015. Again, I appreciate that these slides in particular show the past, and what we're concerned about now is moving forward, but I think that the trends here can be helpful to us in grounding what we may be needing to shift going forward. So next slide, please. So we worked this year, as we have in past years, with the Kaiser Family Foundation to use their analysis of bilateral donor funding for family planning since 2012 to be able to show the trends. So this slide shows that for the first time in 2015, there was a slight decrease of about 6% below the 2014 funding levels. The decline is largely due to the appreciation of the U.S. dollar, and after these exchange rate fluctuations are taken into account, the 2015 funding essentially matches that of 2014. In the currency of origin, 5 donors, including Denmark, France, Germany, the Netherlands, and Sweden, increased funding in 2015. 2 donors, Canada and the U.S., remained flat, and 3, Australia, Norway, and the UK, actually declined a bit. The U.S. remained the largest bilateral donor, accounting for almost half of total funding. The UK was the second largest at about 20%, accounting for a fifth of all bilateral funding, followed by the Netherlands, France, and Sweden. And what doesn't show in this slide but is interesting is if we actually added foundations as a total group to this slide, that they would be the 4th largest funder after the Netherlands, and that then the U.S., the UK, the Netherlands, and donors together would account for 90% of bilateral funding. So as foundations expand that portfolio, I think that's one area that we'll be looking to work with more intensely as well in the coming months and years to see what capacity there is for increased support to meet any funding shortfalls that may be coming our way. So what also isn't shown here is the UNFPA funding, as UNFPA spent about $341 million, or 42% of its resources, on family planning in 2015, and that's slightly up by about 2% from what they spent in 2014. And the foundation investment was about $190 million towards that total goal again. Next slide, please. So mobilizing domestic resources is a key part of this conversation as well, in terms of how we look at the long-term sustainability for the sector. And we shift from particularly from commodity expenditures being something that's funded by donors, to governments taking on that responsibility as and when they can, and in an incremental way that is sustainable and something that's at the heart of the commitment to providing family planning to citizens within countries as well. One of the things that was noted during the reference group is that clearly the countries are responsible and have been supporting the infrastructure for family planning within the broader healthcare systems. But by not funding the contraceptive portion of that, the critical piece of both growing and then providing the quality services within a range of methods as well, that well-being piece of it remains critically funded by the donors. And for a holistic approach to be sustainable and have the longest term impact, there's a lot of recognition that this is something that, again, that we're encouraging countries to take on as they move through that as well. So we're also looking to have better understanding of what the domestic infrastructure expenditures are, and that's, again, something that's remained critically very difficult to do. So we're working with WHO through their health expenditure tracking processes as well to see if we can have greater clarity for family planning, because without a real understanding of what domestic expenditures currently are and what it costs to fund the programs that we're hoping to grow over time, we're at a disadvantage in terms of our ability to fund against that. So we encourage all those who have a role in this to do what we can, both from the donor perspective and from the government perspective, to be able to make adjustments to share with greater clarity what the costing is for family planning programs so that we can grow them as we move along. Okay. So the next thing we'd like to talk about is the FP2020 Partnership, and to give you a bit of an update on how this has grown over time as well. So we're very happy to say that 3 new countries joined the FP2020 Partnership, and I hope they're on the phone with us today as well. We joined Afghanistan, Laos PDR, and Vietnam. We also had 3 organizations who made critical commitments to FP 2020, including the Margaret Pike Trust with the Population and Sustainability Network, Chase Africa, and the important partner that many of you have worked with very closely for decades, Population Services International, or PSI. There were also 4 partners who renewed their commitments to FP 2020 last year, including the Government of Germany, IPPF, IntraHealth, and FHI 360. So the partnership continues to grow and flourish, and one of the things that we talked about a lot 2 weeks ago in Tanzania was the way in which FP 2020 is leveraging these relationships across both the global and the country spectrum. We've worked very closely with the Partnership for Maternal, Newborn, and Child Health, PMNCH, at that global piece as well to encourage sustained understanding and promotion of family planning as a critical maternal health intervention, as that remains essential to most of the work that you're all doing as well at the country level. We worked very closely with the Ouagadougou Partnership, with Reproductive Health Supplies Coalition, and with the Global Financing Facility on the financing piece, and to gain greater understanding there. So I think that that partnership and the work of FP 2020 has really been, we're seeing the fruit of that in multiple levels of these conversations. Next slide, please. We also learned a lot from our partnership with all of you over the course of the last year, and we're committed to the focal point meeting process and again to the quarterly engagement that many of the colleagues that have joined me here around the table in Washington are working through with all of you. We wanted to share this slide because I think that you'll recognize the commonality of many of the issues that all of you are working on, and that we're committed, again, through the partnership to make sure that we're addressing many of these. We shared this information as well with the reference group, and they asked us as well to convey to you that they will continue to work in alignment and partnership at the headquarters level to ensure that we're supporting you to address these critical issues as you're doing your work. Next, on rights and empowerment, we also wanted to share that there's an ongoing conversation here around how we make the case that rights-based programs are more effective and have longer-term and more productive impact at the country level. So there's a community of practice that's formed around this that's helping to put together a measurement agenda so that we can show that impact through a data and evidence platform to be able to share that with you. Again, this is a growing effort. We're still at the starting phases of it, but there's an incredible amount of effort in that, and many of your organizations have funded programs that are rights-based that we're able then to show impact. And by pulling all this together, we're hoping that we can make a stronger case for why a rights-based approach is a sustainable approach. And then finally, on youth engagement, again, we're seeing a lot of, we're hearing from all of you that this remains a critical area for work going forward. And the 3 main areas, the ways that we're going to approach this, especially in 2017, again, are improving the data on young people and encouraging the use of this data to inform strategic decision making, to make sure that young people are at the center of what we're doing and are a part of our processes, including through the reference group, and we hope moving forward as well through the work that you're doing as focal points and with the focal point workshops, and in cultivating an acceptance of the evidence-based interventions on youth, including for postpartum and post-abortion family planning and for LARCs as well. And then finally, we continue to make the case for how family planning has an impact on all of the Sustainable Development Goals and remains a critical intervention. There is a strong understanding of this from the reference group perspective as well, and a commitment by the leaders from that discussion to take forward this messaging and try to build bridges with other sectors. I know that many of you have been working on this for many years. The SDGs, I think, provide us a platform for making this case and to working with other communities to understand how stronger family planning programs can have a positive impact on their work as well. So we'll continue that effort. So with that, I want to turn over now to my colleague Jason Bremner to look at the measurement agenda and the core indicators at the midpoint of FP 2020.
Thank you, Beth. It's a pleasure to join you all today and to present the FP 2020 Progress Report data to all of you. I know that as focal points, many of you are familiar with this data, but I will just cover some basics on the measurement and methodology before going into the data, just as a reminder to all of us of what we're looking at as a group. This graphic just shows the calendar that we follow each year to produce the progress report. And FP 2020 and our colleagues at Track 20 collaborate closely to advance our family planning measurement agenda that Beth talked about. And together we're working toward increasing the availability, visibility, quality, and use of family planning data, both at a global level amongst donors, as well as at a country level with all of you as focal points with the Track 20 and M&E officers, and with increasingly with civil society organizations. So a huge thanks goes out to the Track 20 team that has worked with many of you and assembled all of this data so that we can annually report progress through this progress report. I'd also like to thank the PME working group, a group of expert advisors who work with us on reviewing each year the data and helping us produce the graphics and the report. FP 2020 uses a suite of quantitative metrics, which we call our core indicators, 17 core indicators, to monitor progress annually across the focus countries. And we are collecting data generally in the beginning part of the year through approximately June, in which we're collecting all available surveys, service statistics, and then working in country to have estimates produced from that and validated through the country consensus workshops. Once we have all of this finalized in approximately July, we sort of close the books on new data coming in for the year. So if you see something in the progress report that is not aligned with your source of data that may have recently come out, have no fear, we'll capture that data source next year through this same process. An example for all of you would be the Myanmar 2015 Demographic Health Survey, which was just released, is not covered in this progress report, but we look forward to including in next year's report. I know that many of you are familiar with this, this slide, which is developed based on our family planning estimation tool. And traditionally, as countries, you've had to rely on estimates of modern contraceptive prevalence from surveys, and then have had to wait several years between surveys to assess the impacts of your efforts to improve family planning programs. The family planning estimation tool is meant to improve upon that, and it takes all available surveys, all available estimates of contraceptive prevalence rates, unmet need, and demand satisfied, and incorporates them together into a single model that will give us an annual estimate. And that is how we come up with the annual estimates for each country that are in this report. Methodologically, there are two important components of FP 2020's measurement agenda that I just want to remind you all of so that we're clear on what additional users means. And that is that we start our baseline, or we start our measurement period at 2012 as the baseline year, and there are 0 additional users in 2012. That does not mean that there weren't a whole lot of women and girls using contraception. In fact, we estimate about 270 million women were using contraception, but at that point, that's our baseline. Moving forward from there, each year we estimate the number of women who are using contraception in each country, and then we compare that to the 2012 number to get the difference, which is our additional users. So that is what we refer to as sort of our baseline or rolling baseline period. Each year, we are recalculating both the initial number for 2012 as well as our numbers for the subsequent years. So although it pains me to say it, you can recycle last year's progress report because all of the years have been re-estimated. And it's not it's not a great practice to go back and compare progress report this year with progress report last year. We are re-estimating every year. Each year we do a progress report. Then just a second component that I'd like to refer you to is the right side of this graphic, which is the data recency. We are increasingly relying on service statistics, and you will see in the dark blue boxes in the upper parts of this figure show countries that incorporated service statistics into their model. This is increasingly becoming a means of updating estimates, and I encourage everyone to focus on strengthening service statistics systems, your HMIS systems, to help us to better inform these models. Beth has already shown this, which is our traditional progress graphic, and I just want to highlight again that in 2012 there were 270 million users across the 69 countries, and we've passed this milestone this year that for the first time ever there are 300 million women and girls using modern methods of contraception. I think Beth has mentioned that we have a long way to go to 120 million additional users, but what I really like to focus on outside of the impressive effort that it takes as a community to reach 300 million women and girls is that each country really has a different pattern of progress, and that we encourage each country not to focus on the 300 million as a whole, but then to look at your own progress. You all have set your own goals, and I encourage the 38 countries, and hopefully soon to be a 39th country to be revealed soon, to monitor your progress towards your own goals. With that, I turn to the next slide, which is the now familiar S-curve, which I think is helping both the global community and all of you at a country level to think about the progress that you might see in your growth in modern contraceptive prevalence rates. This S-curve is based on the assumption that across all 69 countries, there's a historical pattern of growth that we can look to gauge our current progress and how we're doing. On the left side of this, you can see that when MCPR is very low, countries tend to see slow annual growth in their MCPR. And the length of this period can vary by country, but to position themselves to enter a period of rapid growth, countries really have to ensure first that there's a demand for the family planning services and that there aren't barriers to growth. Countries can enter into a second period or a period where growth can start to occur, and a few of the Anglophone Africa and Asian countries are in this period where they are likely to see growth with the right investments in the near term. And I encourage those countries to really look at their data, where there are opportunities for growth. And I know that many of you are working with the Track 20 colleagues and others to assess your national and subnational data as well on this S-curve. When countries are in the middle period here, growth tends to be quite rapid, and this is where there's a great opportunity, and this is where many of the East and Southern African countries have either, are currently or are transitioning out of. And this is the period where you can see MCPR growth above 2 percentage points per year, as high as 3 percentage points in some of the countries. And you can see Ethiopia is in that period now, and Mozambique is likely moving into that period based on our most recent estimate from this year's progress report. Then finally, in the upper two periods, contraceptive prevalence growth really starts to slow as there are less women who are not using, and they tend to be harder to reach. And many of the East Asia and Asian countries are in this period. And so in this period, growth becomes a little more difficult, but with the right investments in a mix of contraceptive methods, in sustaining quality services, you can continue to see growth and declines in inequity across a national level. It's important to note that at a global level, 2/3 of women of reproductive age across the 69 countries are actually in these latter phases of the S-curve. So that affects a bit our global picture, but at a national level, I encourage you to look at your regions and look at subnational data and where there are opportunities subnationally. Let's take a closer look at additional users by region in 2016 and where these 30.2 million total additional users live. You can see that more than half of the 30 million additional users of contraception are in South Asia, 16 million, which is not surprising, as the most populous FP2020 countries are in that region. So that's a great accomplishment. It represents a huge base of users that are currently receiving services. But it also means these countries while continuing to add users, they're not growing as rapidly. And that can be illustrated by the large number of additional users that are coming from East and Southern Africa. So you see that 25% are from East and Southern Africa, a region that's growing very quickly, has far less women of reproductive age, but really adding quite a bit to services each year. And Beth mentioned that now 30% of all women are using modern contraception. That's a milestone that should be celebrated. I think Beth has largely covered these points, but I do want to point out that countries in Asia, including the largest, India, Indonesia, and Bangladesh, in the progress report, if you look at those, they will show little growth in the proportion of women using a modern method since 2012. But I will point out they are reaching the most women. If you add up these three countries, they certainly represent the bulk of or more than half of the 300 million users across the 69 countries. So it's not a small feat to provide those services. I think each of these countries, however, is focusing on continued improvements, method mix, quality services, and equity, and should continue along that effort, as well as trying to reach those who are hardest to reach. And one way of doing that is to look at unmet need for family planning. Across all of the 69 countries, you will see that 22% of married or in union women of reproductive age still have an unmet need for a modern method of family planning. This together amounts to approximately 134 million women. So there's a large population that we still need to reach there who have an unmet need. This is just the married women, and I will point out to you that in general, for modern contraceptive prevalence, we are measuring in our progress report all women, an important part of the FP2020 agenda. For married women, we still struggle with our estimation models to do this for all women, and we are continuing to make improvements to our annual methodology that we use. I hope by next year we'll be able to report on unmet need among all women, but it's still out of reach for this year. It continues to be a big part of our work with Track 20 and other partners. I'd like you to look down at the last bullet here. That does show that despite the higher levels of contraceptive use that we see in Asia, there are still 90 million married women in Asia that have an unmet need. So if you look at that 134 million above and compare the 90 million there, you really see a large amount of unmet need despite the higher levels of contraceptive use. So certainly our work remains ahead of us. This year in the progress report, we've really tried to focus several pages on understanding this new indicator demand satisfied, which is core indicator 4 for us. It's a complicated indicator, and it's constructed from both MCPR and unmet need for modern methods. So the reason we focused on this particular indicator is that many of you know it has become the SDG target indicator for SDG target 3.7, which is to by 2030 provide universal access to sexual and reproductive health care services, including for family planning information and integration and education. So we really need to learn more about demand satisfied, and we've provided some graphics to illustrate that. This graphic just shows that there are different ways that you can have very similar levels of demand satisfied. And you can look here at Niger and Djibouti. They have different modern contraceptive prevalence rates. So in Niger, 15% of married women, in Djibouti, 23%. They have different levels of unmet need, but when you do the calculus, and you end up with very similar levels of demand satisfied. I'm happy to answer questions about this as we move forward. We will continue to try to educate the community on this, but I encourage you to explore this graphic on your own time to get a better understanding of demand satisfied. But to give you a sense of demand satisfied, where you all lie across your countries on demand satisfied, regionally, you can see that levels of demand satisfied vary greatly across the FP2020 countries. And you can see here the combinations of MCPR in dark blue, unmet need in the turquoise color there, that combine together to create the total demand for family planning in a region or in any given country. And the amount that dark blue bar fills the total bar is essentially the demand satisfied. And in the bottom gray bar, horizontal bar across the bottom of the graph, you will see the demand satisfied levels by region. I like to think of this as sort of the water filling the cup. The cup, or the size of the cup, is the total demand, and the amount of that you have filled with contraceptive prevalence is the demand satisfied. And you can see that in the Asian countries, you're actually approaching a benchmark for the SDG of 75% that's been proposed for the community. So that's a measure of success, but it's going to be a challenge to increase that further. So I encourage you, you have till 2030 to continue to work on that. We do know now that for those countries that are struggling to achieve this demand satisfied, there is really no path to the SDGs that doesn't go through the FP 2020 goals. So accelerated progress to FP to 2020 will help countries achieve their SDGs. I'll just have 2 or 3 more slides, and I just want to say a couple of things about important things that we are working with countries on measuring. And those are method mix, changes in method mix, and then finally discontinuation. This map is a nice representation of the diverse set of most common methods that are distributed across the 69 countries that we work on. There's really no right method mix or ideal method, but generally we agree that a wide variety of methods is a component of quality of care and an important principle of rights-based family planning. So that said, we can see here that some countries, the countries with a triangle, have a very skewed distribution, meaning that the most common method in that country represents more than 40% of the, 60% of the modern method use. So that means that one method is really dominating. And in each of those countries, it should explore what is that method, what other methods are available, what other methods are countries using. But we have a diverse set here, dominated by injectables, but certainly a diverse pattern across the countries. We did look at this year at across the 69 countries, those countries that have sufficient data to look at method mix change over time. And among these, we are seeing the fastest increases in both injectables and in implants or LARCs. So that's positive signs for the communities, particularly on the focus on LARCs. These two countries just illustrate that the changes in method mix include two factors. One is that methods can change, and such as Malawi in the bottom graph, where both injectables and implants are increasing, and that is driving an increase in MCPR. A change in method mix may also just be a substitution, and that's what's occurring in Egypt, as we see a decline in some methods and an increase in others. And here you can see a decline in sterilization, but an increase in some of the other methods that people are using, but no change in the total MCPR. So in each country, we encourage you to look at your method mix patterns, and we'll help you to look at method mix change over time. The final thing that we highlight in this year's progress report is discontinuation. And we just summarize actually a discontinuation report that is available on the FP2020 website. But it's important to note that the 300 million users of family planning in the FP2020 countries are not a static group. For various reasons, women and their partners may stop using a modern contraceptive method, or they may switch to a different method, as I mentioned just a moment ago. Contraceptive discontinuation presents a challenge, actually, to achieving FP2020 goals. As data indicate on this particular table, there are many women who begin using a contraceptive method and then discontinue, meaning that in the 12 months after starting use, they stop using that method. And our analysis this year suggests that discontinuation rates for method-related reasons, meaning related to the method, not because they wanted to get pregnant or not because they switch, are quite high for the short-term methods. And you can see here that almost 1 in 5 users of contraception, of injectables or pill, will discontinue in their first year of use. That's a median across the countries, 21 countries that we had data for. It's important to look at your discontinuation data. It's usually available from the most recent survey, and we would be happy to help you to look at that data. So before we answer your questions, we're going to return to Beth for an update on how you can learn more about progress from FP2020.
Thank you, Jason. So we wanted to quickly share with you that another change we've made here at the Secretariat is to our website and the country pages for the work that all of you do. We wanted to make this more interactive and more usable and useful to you. So Rati, please take us to, I think we're going to look at Tanzania's country page on the FP2020 website. Let's see if we can do a live demonstration and share with you the information that's there.
Thank you, Beth. Just give me 1 second to actually pull up the screen here. There might be a slight delay as we take a look.
Okay, so while Rati's pulling it up, I'll share with you what the idea here is behind these reconfigured web pages, and it's, again, to make them more usable to all stakeholders working at the country level. So we've pulled together in PDF format the essential documents that talk about your work and your country plan. So starting with whatever national plan you have, a CIP, or again, the national plan that leads this. We also have your action plan working with FP2020. So from Tanzania, you'll see from the top under key documents. Do you want to scroll to the top there, Rati? Again, starting with the national plan, the action plan for work you're doing together, the roadmap that's the national action plan for the broader process on maternal, reproductive, newborn, and child health. We have the postpartum family planning action plan from the 2015 postpartum family planning conference that many of you participated in. We also have Tanzania's original FP 2020 commitment and the annual commitment updates that the government has submitted. And then finally, we have the Global Financing Facility project appraisal document so that you can track what Tanzania is doing in terms of their GFF investment. We're also pulling in additional data every year and making sure that you have access to country-specific data pages so that you and then use them in your advocacy efforts as well. And here we'd appreciate your feedback to make sure that these are structured in a way that's most useful to all of you in your efforts. We're also going to be tracking country-specific research and news, and the shareability has been enhanced so that data and information can be shared socially and via email with colleagues and partners much more easily. These sites are also open to all of you, so as there's more or additional information or new studies or project reports that come available at the country level, we would love for you to share those with us so that they can be uploaded onto this website and made available for all partners so these sites, these country-specific pages are as useful as possible to your broader processes in countries. So your feedback on what we've designed would be really appreciated, again, because we hope these are useful for you. So anything you want to share in terms of content or adjustments to how these functions would be most appreciated. So with that, we're going to go ahead and open it up to the Q&A. And again, all of you can submit your questions through the Q&A pod or by pressing *6 to unmute your phone line. And during the presentation, we had two questions that came in. And Jason, these questions are actually for you. The first one is from Myanmar, who've planned to organize the consensus meeting for FP 2020 in December, just in a month. And they're wondering if they can get an update on the Track 20 website with DHS data after it.
Thank you, and I was really excited to see the Myanmar DHS data key indicators report just several weeks ago, 2 weeks ago or so, and was happened to be looking at it just yesterday. I think Myanmar has shown faster than anticipated progress, and so you're actually achieving higher MCPR than we had estimated. I think that's a fantastic achievement. We tend to, we will be moving forward with Track 20 with a new set of consensus meetings. So Track 20 has traditionally done one meeting per year in each country. Though my Track 20 colleagues are not here today, we have talked with them about 2 consensus meetings per year in each country, and so that suggests to me that they are planning for your upcoming meeting. That second consensus meeting will not affect what goes on to the progress report in terms of our digital site, but it will update likely the Track 20 website with new DHS data. We'll have a tab for Myanmar DHS summary and can update our progress numbers there. So we tend to try to collect and update our numbers biannually, but we only share them with the whole community once a year. So I think that is possible, and we'll work with the Track 20 team to do so. Thanks.
Thanks, Jason. The second question is also for you. It's from our colleagues in Nepal who have issues with discontinuation of modern methods, and they're wondering if we're looking into this when we're measuring additional users.
Thank you. That's a great question. And our methods do account for the discontinuation in our additional user calculation. Because in any given year, we are just estimating the proportion of women who are using contraception, and we are then multiplying that by the women of reproductive age. that means that we are not following. An additional user does not mean it is one woman who may come in and out of contraception every given year. We're looking at all of the women in a year who are using contraception, and if they discontinue that year, they would not be picked up in a survey as a contraceptive user. So the methodology accounts for that, and that's why we say there's a great opportunity to increase additional users by decreasing the discontinuation, and that was my latter point, particularly with the short-term methods.
Thank you, Jason. Our third question, didn't identify itself, so I don't know where it came from, but it was wondering about an update on our plans for focal point engagement, if there will be focal point workshops in 2017 and what we're planning for that. So I'm going to turn this question over to my colleague Eva Ross, who many of you know as our Director for Country Support. Eva?
Thank you, Beth, and I'm so pleased that so many of you were able to join, and as Rati mentioned, this is being recorded, so hopefully you'll be able to share it with your colleagues who were not able to join us today. But one of the things we've been learning a lot from all of you over the past 6 months, now that this new country support model has been put in place, we're really learning from all of you as to what's working and perhaps what could be improved. So we really look forward, along with the regional managers and associates that you've all been working with very closely over the past 6 months or so. We look forward in the coming months to work with you again and really get feedback, more concrete feedback on ways that the model can be improved, and specifically what's working with all of you in country. And we'll take that into account as we plan, again, in consultation with all of you for the next round of focal point workshops. So that includes everything from, what is the most appropriate date? Are there other events in the region perhaps that we can piggyback a workshop to make travel easier on all of you and all of us as well? So please look forward to those conversations in the coming months.
Thank you, Eva. And our last question is with regard to the Global Financing Facility, just asking for an update in terms of how family planning is faring within those plans. And I did want to share, for those of you who may not be aware, that 2 weeks ago when we were in Tanzania for the reference group meeting, we aligned that meeting with the Global Financing Facility Investors Group meeting. So during that week on Monday and Tuesday, we had the FP2020 reference group meeting. On Wednesday, we had a bridge day between the reference group and the investors group, and then the Global Finance Facility had their investors group meeting that Thursday and Friday. So that bridge day was a really powerful opportunity where country representatives themselves, and in many cases it was ministers of health, presented their GFF investment cases and talked about how family planning is positioned within those and what they have done specifically to ensure that, in particular, commodities are financed through these investment cases. A lot was learned, I think, through the GFF process, and one of the things that came out very clearly is a strong recognition that family planning should be well represented. It isn't consistently so, but there is an opportunity for some adjustments to be made as these investments, again, are going out the door. The only country at this point who actually has money for disbursement toward their plan is Tanzania. They were one of the first wave countries. What's also been learned through this second wave is that they've had more time for more thoughtful and consultative processes to engage with broader stakeholder interests within the country, and we're seeing that happen to a greater degree. It's clear that there still needs to be a much more thoughtful approach to the needs of young people across the GFF, not just for family planning, but for all RMNCAH interventions. Some countries have done a really good job of that, including Liberia, who had a consultation, including with the WHO, working with technical experts to bring in that latest evidence for how they can have the greatest impact for young people. So it very much remains a work in progress, and really, I think, a mixed results at this point, but there's a stronger understanding of what this opportunity can bring for family planning and what family planning means to the RMNCAH work at the country level. So we were very enthusiastic after this opportunity for both groups to look together at the data and information and at the results, so that there can be a stronger push from the World Bank itself in working with all of you to make sure that that space for consultation on family planning takes place as these investment cases are built. So there remains, again, a commitment to looking at that. Now we have one last question from Moriam in Nigeria, and I want to give a special shout out to our Nigeria colleagues who last week had their 4th National Family Planning Conference that some of us here from the Secretariat were able to participate in, and it was really a great moment, I think, of enthusiasm to show Nigeria's focus on family planning and the intent to have impact on the sector, and we were thrilled to be a part of that and appreciate the warm welcome we received to partner in that meeting. And Moriam is asking if donor resources projected over the years, or about donor resources, are donors increasing funding in the same number of countries over the years or expanding countries their funding? So that's a really good question, and I'm going to turn it to Jason to respond.
Thanks for the question, Moriam. It's a complicated mix, and I'd say that our current data from the Kaiser Family Foundation don't allow us to look very closely at where the $1.3 billion are actually spent. We do have that for some of the donors, but not for all of them. So I couldn't answer that question directly. We have seen that through FP 2020 and the commitment-making process that countries that traditionally have been under-resourced and not noticed are finding ways to get new resources. Some of that has been through our own RRM grant or Rapid Response Mechanism means, but we are also seeing private foundations trying to fill the gap in countries that have been under-resourced. The 2 largest donors that Beth mentioned, USAID and DFID, have driven the bulk of the growth in resources, and their priority countries have not changed since 2012. Each of them is continuing to look at the countries they fund and that mix, but has not changed.
Thank you, Jason. So I recognize we're already a few minutes over time. We, of course, want to take any other questions you have, so do submit them by email or to the colleagues here that you know and work with, and we're happy to continue the conversation and really look for your input and feedback on both all of the work and our partnership moving forward, especially during this time of transition here in the U.S. I want to end on a really positive note and congratulate our colleagues in the Philippines who are going to have their first family planning conference starting this weekend, and to wish you great luck with that conference. We're with you in spirit, even if we can't be physically with you in the Philippines. It's this kind of partnership and this enthusiasm, I think, that is really going to drive us toward the goals that we've all set, recognizing that these are the lives of women and girls who are counting on all of us to do all we can to improve the quality of the health care that they receive and their ability to manage these critical issues within their own lives. So thank you very much for being with us today, and again for your partnership. We're here to support your work, so your feedback is critical to what we do to be as effective as possible, again, to help you make the progress that you want to make. So thank you for that. It's an honor to work with you, and we wish you all the best in all that you do. Thank you and goodbye.